Okay, so welcome back to the deep dive. And you guys know the drill, right? We take a deep dive, a really deep dive into all sorts of things, media, history, psychology, you name it. And today is, well, it's a classic.
A classic and a controversial one at that.
Right. The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. This was actually one of your requests. We've got a ton of messages asking us to cover this book, so you know it's got to be good.
It's definitely sparked its fair share of debate over the years, and that's kind of what makes it so fascinating, right? I mean, here we are, all these years later, and we're still talking about Holden Caulfield and what he represents.
Okay, yeah, so for anyone who maybe hasn't cracked open this book since high school, can we just do a quick recap? Like, who is Holden Caulfield? Why is he such a big deal?
Well, he's this teenager, right? Expelled from yet another fancy prep school. He's kind of wandering around New York City, trying to figure out, well, trying to figure out life, who he is, where he belongs, all that good stuff. But he's not your typical angst-ridden teen. There's a lot more to him than that.
Yeah, he's definitely not your cookie-cutter character. Like, he can be so cynical and judgmental, but then also he's got this vulnerability about him.
Exactly. He's full of contradictions. He calls everyone and everything phony, but deep down, he's yearning for authenticity, for genuine connection.
It's like he sees the world as this big, fake, superficial mess, and he's just trying to find something real, something true to hold on to.
And that's something that resonates with so many readers, right? I mean, who hasn't felt like an outsider at some point, especially during those teenage years?
Totally. It's like that universal feeling of being misunderstood, of feeling out of place. I remember when I was in high school, I felt that way all the time. I was really into poetry, and everyone else thought it was super lame. They were all listening to, I don't know, whatever was popular back then.
So you had your own Holden Caulfield moment.
I guess you could say that. It's funny how those feelings can stick with you, even years later. But okay, back to Holden. I mean, he doesn't just complain about phonies. He actively tries to protect himself, right? Like he creates this whole persona, this cynical, detached observer.
It's a defense mechanism. He's trying to shield himself from the pain and disappointment he sees all around him. He's especially disillusioned by the adult world, which he sees as this corrupting force. And that ties into one of the most important themes in the book, this idea of preserving innocence, of protecting childhood from the inevitable fall into adulthood.
Which brings us to what might be the most famous symbol in the entire book, the Catcher in the Rye. It's from that poem Holden misremembers, right? About all these kids playing in this field of rye, and someone's got to be there to catch them before they fall off the cliff.
Right. And that image becomes this powerful metaphor for Holden's whole worldview. He sees himself as this catcher in the rye, this protector of innocence. He wants to save kids from the pain and disillusionment of growing up.
Which is, well, it's a noble goal, but kind of an impossible one, isn't it? I mean, no one can stay a child forever. You have to grow up eventually.
Exactly. And that's the tragedy of Holden Caulfield. He's so fixated on preserving innocence that he can't accept the realities of the world. He's constantly searching for something pure and authentic, but he can't seem to find it. And his inability to cope with that disillusionment ultimately leads to his breakdown.
Yeah, the ending is it's pretty bleak. I mean, he ends up in a mental institution. We don't really know what happens to him after that. It's kind of left up to the reader to decide.
And that ambiguity is deliberate on Salinger's part. He's not giving us easy answers. He's forcing us to think for ourselves, to draw our own conclusions about Holden's fate and what it all means.
Which, some people find frustrating. They want a neat and tidy ending. They want to know what happens to Holden.
Yeah.
But I kind of like that it's left open. It makes you think, It makes you wonder about the long-term effects of that kind of disillusionment, that kind of alienation.
And it also speaks to the power of the book. I mean, The Catcher in the Rye has been banned in some schools. It's been praised by others. It's sparked countless debates about censorship, about mental health, about the challenges of adolescence.
Okay, so let's talk about the controversy. I mean, Holden Caulfield, is he a hero, a villain, a cautionary tale? What do we make of this guy?
I don't think there's a simple answer. He's flawed, he's rebellious, he's often selfish, but he's also vulnerable, he's idealistic, he's searching for something real in a world that often feels fake, and that complexity is what makes him such an enduring character.
That's why people are still talking about him, still debating his merits all these years later.
Right, and it's why the book continues to resonate with readers. It captures something essential about the human experience, that feeling of being lost, of searching for meaning, of trying to find your place in a world that doesn't always make sense.
So as always, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on The Catcher in the Rye? Did you relate to Holden Caulfield? Did you find him sympathetic, annoying? Let us know in the comments. And here's something to ponder. If Holden were alive today, in our world of social media and 247 news cycles, would he be even more disillusioned? Would he retreat further into himself, or could he find a way to connect with others in a meaningful way?
That's a great question.
Something to think about.
Definitely.
And that's it for this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring.